Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Irit Gilad, and I'll be your moderator today. Today, we're going to discuss the drivers and challenges of deploying and managing SAP on public clouds. Before we start, I would like to go through some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and recording of this webinar will be sent to you to review or to share with colleagues. The webinar is designed to be interactive. Please feel free to submit your questions, and we will try to address as many questions as time permits at the end of the webinar. With me today, I have Tyler Constable. Tyler is leading Syslink Xandria sales engineering. He has over 15 years in the SAP arena, about 10 of them focused on SAP monitoring, management, and analysis. Hey, Tyler, how are you?
Doing well, Ari. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's start. Move to the next slide. So, today's webinar will have several parts. We will start with going over the state of the cloud market and the drivers we see in it, discuss the cloud architecting consideration and terminology, and then focus on the unique challenges that deploying SAP in the cloud environment create, and some ways to solve these challenges. Before we dive in, we wanted to check with you, the attendance of this webinar, and to see where your company is standing with your plans on moving to the SAP cloud. Let me push that. Okay, you should be able to see that now. Please choose the answer that best fits your company. So what are your cloud migration plans? All of our systems are in the cloud. We have a hybrid solution, some cloud and some on-premise. We are planning to move some systems to the cloud in the next 12 months. We're planning to move some systems in the next 12 to 24 months, or we don't have concrete cloud migration plans. So we'll give just a few more moments to answer. See, the answers are coming in. Okay, so let's see if I can share it. So these are the answers we see, and which is actually, I have to say, is pretty typical to a lot of the discussions and the information that we're hearing from many other companies lately. It looks like a lot of companies are starting to move or starting to look into moving to cloud, but a lot of them are not rushing into it. And most of them will keep some systems on-prem, and will move some to the cloud, and will stay with the hybrid solution. Tyler, is that what you're hearing as well?
Yeah, it is. It seems like this is what we're seeing a lot in the industry. Is a lot of organizations are starting to move part of their SAP systems or part of their SAP ecosystem into the cloud, but it's either a rolling project or they're planning on keeping some still on-prem for either legacy or some smaller components as well. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's move to the next slide. So looking on what research is showing us, Forrester predicts that the three largest players in the market, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, and Microsoft Azure, capture 3/4 of this market already in 2018. Cloud is no longer the tactical solution, but rather a strategic enabler of connected economies. And public cloud adoption has become mainstream in 2018, yet only a small fraction of core business applications run in a public or private cloud. Forrester also forecasts that in 2019, a major transformation of legacy apps is expected, using powerful container-based cloud-native digital application platform, and that cloud spending will spike next year as many infrastructure and operation professionals and their enterprise will adopt cloud tools and services wherever and however they can. Gartner says that by 2020, a corporate that says no cloud policy will be as rare as no internet policy is today. Now, if we look on the drivers to cloud migration, different research showing different top runners as the one leading reason to move to the cloud, but all of them have these three reasons in their top three. In a recent research that IBM did, we see that cloud adoption fosters innovation because it can transcend geographic, industrial, organizational, and operational barriers. Now, cloud also accelerates innovation by enabling quick prototyping of new ideas and fast experimentation, which is otherwise harder in a traditional on-prem environment. Cloud services such as AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud appeal to many organizations because of their stated features. If you look on them, they all mention pay-per-use, ability to scale up or down based on usage, high resiliency, self-service, higher up-to-date security, and many other reasons. Now, all these benefits are expected to lead to a much lower IT cost, faster time to market, and better service quality compared with traditional IT offering. I would like to hand off now to Tyler to take it from here, and well, I guess take you to a flight in the cloud.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Arit, and thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Before we really dive into today's webinar, it's important to talk about what does it mean when we say cloud? Because I think, every person and every organization has their own view as to what the cloud is. So the way we see it, there's really four main components or four different types of clouds. On the far left, we have our private cloud, and this is where the end organization, the end customer, really has full control of almost the whole stack itself, and that may even include the hardware, depending on what kind of agreement they have, but they've got full control of everything that is in the cloud. The next one in is the infrastructure of a service, really is kind of the public clouds. And this is where we're going to focus a lot of our time today. This is the AWS, the Azure, the GCP or Google Cloud Platform. This is where essentially the end customer's not going to have any interaction with the hardware or even on the virtual layer, but there's a handoff at the operating system. They can control whatever applications they want to put on there, any databases. We move over to the platform of a service. You can think of this more of like SAP's cloud platform, where the end user may not have access to a database or anything like that, or the operating system, but they can customize the application itself. There's a lot of managed service providers out there as well that are getting into this area, where they might have their own private cloud or might use one of the infrastructure as a service or public clouds, and they actually build a platform on top of that where they manage the database, but really give the customer control to work on the application layer. And then we move into the one where essentially on the far right, software as a service, where the end customer relinquishes full control of pretty much everything. So whether it's hardware, the operating system, database, really there's nothing that the customer is responsible for. They can just log on and be able to enter any business needs from there. Now, on top of that, one other point of clarification, we're going to talk a lot today about scaling in the cloud, and specifically SAP in the cloud. But again, it's another term that gets thrown around a lot, like cloud. The word scale. We want to be able to scale up. Well, there's actually a couple different ways to scale, and today we're going to talk about scaling up and scaling down, and scaling out and scaling in. So what that means, scaling up, is where we have the same server, and we're going to keep adding resources to that one server. So for example, if you've got a server or an operating system with 2 CPU and 4 gigs of memory, you add some more, and that same server now has 4 CPU and 12 gigs of memory. That's scaling up. And obviously, the reverse of that, pulling those resources away, is scaling down. Now, scaling out and scaling in, a little different. This is where we're going to actually add additional servers. So we're not just modifying one, we're going to add additional servers. Where this becomes very helpful is in the SAP world. So again, scaling up and scaling down can be very helpful as well, but when we scale out, essentially what we're doing is we can actually add additional app servers or additional instances. Now, just quick layman's terms here, from a technical aspect, every SAP system is built on top of what's called a central instance and a database. From there, application servers are little work engines that can be turned on or turned off. And they will feed the information back to the central instance in the database. If the central instance or database come down, essentially your SAP system is down. So essentially you're controlling and modifying app servers that come up and down. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is our scale up and our scale out. Now, the challenge though is As we all know, these Google Cloud, AWS, and Azure all have these great technology behind them to allow the systems to scale automatically. And they all do it phenomenally. The hard part, though, is you put SAP on top of it, and SAP itself isn't as dynamic as you'd expect or as you'd anticipate. But just saying, well, it's in the cloud, well, I can scale now. Well, that's not really the case. A recent study by our friends at FIT and ASUG, um, done in 2018, shows some of the main challenges that customers that are currently in the cloud, SAP customers, what kind of things are they experiencing? The top three are very, very important and also very interesting. Inconsistent standards, right? So today we're going to hit on that a little bit as to how can we standardize whether you're in a hybrid or multi-cloud environment. The second one down is the one I find most interesting is a lot of people are saying, well, this is more expensive than I anticipated. And if you actually look on the far right, in 2017, that was only 18%. This year, it actually made its way up to 30%. So that's a very interesting topic. And we're going to spend a lot of time on that. We want to make sure we know how to properly utilize the cloud and all the scaling capabilities in an SAP environment to help reduce those costs. And lastly, the unplanned downtime and really just managing downtime in general. We'll talk on that as well. So getting into things, there's really two different views we're going to look at. We're going to use throughout today's webinar. On the left-hand side, we have our public cloud. So again, what we're going to say is, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Microsoft Azure. What they can look at, if you look in the left-hand box, is they primarily see their own cloud, and that's all the way they can, from themselves, they can see the hardware layer, the virtual layer, the operating system. Depending on what cloud and how you architect it, they may even be able to have some access to the database. But they don't have, and they don't even want to get into managing the on-premise solutions as well. That's not the game that they're in. With Syslink Xandria, now, just a quick clarification, Xandria is not a cloud platform itself. It actually sits on top or sits anywhere, either on-prem or in the cloud. So today we're going to be talking about how you can use these public clouds and with Syslink Xandria on top of it, utilizing the technology of both to really make your SAP system fluid and be able to scale up, scale down, scale out, scale in. Now, one thing that's very important to note is we hear a lot of time, well, I can already scale with my public clouds. Well, when it comes to SAP, it's not as easy. So, well, yes, you can see things on the operating system like memory performance and CPU performance from the cloud metrics. Where it gets a little tricky is getting inside and looking at the SAP metrics. And we hear this from all three cloud providers. We've had a lot of conversations with all three, and we hear this from them all the time is, we have a hard time scaling when it comes to SAP because there's things like work processes. And just kind of give a quick example as to what I mean by this is every time, if it's an ABAP-based system, anytime an end user is done filling out what they need on their form and they hit enter in SAP, that processing time, just that little fraction of a second, takes up what's called a work process, and specifically a dialogue work process in SAP. Now, every time that occurs, again, it's just a fraction. It borrows that work process for a fraction of a second, gives it back to a pool so the next end user can use it. And essentially, what ends up happening is if you're a month in, you're a really heavy time where there's a lot of usage in the system, and there's a perfect storm where maybe there's some re-entries going on, and there's month-end closing, and if you're in the technical world and the basis world, perfect storms happen all the time. They're not that uncommon. What ends up happening in this scenario is the work processes fill up, and there a queue begins to happen. A queue so end users see a wait time, right? So what it appears to them is performance. But on the operating system side, CPU and memory might just be just fine. It's just there's not enough work processes. So in this case, we would have to scale out, build additional app servers to be able to offload those additional work processes onto those. So that's the most technical we're going to get today. Essentially, that's just kind of the base components as to why you might see some different performance issues. It's not always just operating system based. There's a lot of things within SAP. Work processes is just one of them. There's a lot of other things that can be going on in the SAP system that cannot be monitored or watched by just things that are watching the operating system or lower than that. Now, one of the top challenges we heard was things are a bit more expensive than they initially thought when moving to the cloud. So really, we need to scale down or scale in. And what that is going to require is the ability to reduce the amount of SAP app servers and workload on those servers. I shouldn't say workload, but to reduce the amount of resources required to run SAP. Now, obviously, if you're full blown and during the day, you probably want to be running pretty, with a lot of your resources. But maybe at nighttime, you can actually scale those back a little bit. If you're a 24/7 shop, it might not be necessary. Maybe you just need manufacturing running at nights and weekends, but you don't need all of the, as much resources on HR and financial. And of course, they'll still need to be available. Maybe just not as many resources, applied to those. So you can actually scale those down a little bit and not pay for those and therefore reduce the costs. If you're a small organization, maybe things like non-production systems may not even need to be available during the weekend. You might actually be able to completely shut down those systems and not pay for those, or I should say reduce those costs significantly, only pay for a little bit of cost throughout the weekend, and then Monday morning bring them back up. The problem with this is not very automated. It just generally just by putting your systems in the cloud, this isn't just going to be automatically available to you. What's required is if you're going to shut down a system, you have to actually make sure that everything is shut down correctly. For example, if there's something running on an app server that you want to shut down, if there's something's running on there and you just pull the system out from underneath it, that could lead to some inconsistent data and even a corrupt database. And that's obviously something very, very difficult to come back from. So you need to be able to get into the system or have a tool that can get into the system, watch to see if anything important is running on that app server, and then shut it down correctly and promptly so it can come down without disrupting or corrupting anything, which is very, very important. Now, that's for reducing some costs, but really the other part of scaling is the ability to scale up or scale out. This might be in a situation where the performance of the system is running really, really poor, and you need to be able to get more resources on the fly. Now, obviously, we can scale up, and that again is just adding more CPU and memory. If that is the problem, again, that may be a problem that's leading to performance issues. And again, we can scale up by adding more resources. You can do that right on the fly. That's very, very easy. Now, it might be something else that is not OS driven. It could be SAP driven. And again, the solution to that might be to add additional instances or additional app servers. Now, the problem with that is that if you're just going to do that on the fly, that's not something you can just quickly do. Usually, you got to require maybe some meetings to discuss this. There might be downloading the right software, getting it installed, making sure it connects, it's at the right patch levels, so on and so forth. It's not quite as easy as you'd imagine. So with Syslink Xandria, what we can do when we're in one of the public clouds, we can actually stand up an app server, have it connected, and then bring it down, bring it to sleep. So essentially, there's not costing much. It's very, very minimal effort to keep a server alive that's just asleep. And as Xandria recognizes that there's performance problems in the SAP system, have it automatically, with zero human interaction, kick off that app server, bring it up, and essentially offload some of that performance issues onto that server or servers or additional instances or app servers, and let that thing run now full control with many more resources that you now are paying for. But then as the system slows back down again, and as whatever the performance issues were, come back down, bring those app servers back down, and reduce your costs again. And essentially what you see now is as you can scale up and scale out and scale down and scale in, by doing that automatically, by being able to look in SAP and get the performance metrics, combined with the ability to stop and start the server levels, from Google Cloud, Azure, or AWS, you become a very fluid system. So you can run very slim and very fit, and as you need the resources, you can add and remove them on the fly automatically, zero human interaction. So you don't have to wake people up in the middle of the night or on the weekends to be able to do this. Now, one of the other challenges we often hear is, well, I've got, before we did put SAP in the cloud, the rest of my organization the IT department put everything else, our Exchange server and everything else, they put them up in the cloud. SAP came along a year or two later. Let's say the IT organization put everything else on AWS, and now, it's time for SAP to go up, and we found that maybe a different solution, GCP or Azure, and I'm just kind of throwing examples out there, is where we want to go. So now we've got this multi-cloud environment, and we still have things on premise as well. So how do you manage all of these things when you've got systems all over the place? Well, the magic with Xandria is no matter which possible cloud or mix of clouds, or even putting on-premise in there, you can actually see all of them on a single pane of glass. So for as an example, here in the top left, you can see our AWS systems. Right below that, you can actually see our predicted growth. So we can actually, this is just up and through the end of November, but if we could actually say all the way through next year and kind of get a predicted growth rate, so how much we can budget for next year. In the middle, we've got Google Cloud, and on the right, we've got Azure. We're able to see all our systems and the health all from a single pane of glass. Now, it's also important to note that you can actually directly access AWS, Azure, or the Google Cloud consoles directly from within Xandria. You'll see in the top right, you can actually click the button and it'll go right into your console screen, so you can actually manage the console itself by just clicking on these individual buttons. Now, this is often the time we hear the question, all right, so this is probably going to be a huge project. I've tried to implement just monitoring solutions in the past for SAP, and it's taken 6 months. This is way more than monitoring, so this is probably going to take me way more. Honestly, the setup of this is just minutes. With Xandria's automated SAP performance metrics, we can actually automate that whole process of by using the parameter sets intelligence within Xandria. So essentially, as soon as it connects, it can recognize what kind of system this is, put the correct performance metrics in place, and then we can automate on top of that as to how the system is going to be stopping and starting and making your system a little bit more fluid. So that means no major project, no consultants, no lengthy configuration, all just done pretty much within minutes. What we're looking at here is another view. This is more of a managed service provider point of view. You can see on the far right, we've got different customers coming down. We've got different clouds. Essentially, we can all manage it all from a single pointed system. Now, the one other major challenge was managing downtime. And this is a very important thing that often gets overlooked. And this is whether you're in the cloud or you're on-prem or you're hybrid, whatever, managing downtime can be a very stressful time, because there might be times that the infrastructure team or the basis team need to take downtime to do something, but the business is just not willing to give them much time. And usually what ends up happening is you end up getting, 2 hours, and there's an agreement every third Saturday of the month we can take a couple of hours to go do something, whatever that is. Now, the hard part about this as well is if you've got 50 or 100 SAP systems, or if you're a managed service provider and you've got hundreds or thousands of systems, this might take a long time just to shut systems down and notify the team that they can go work and then start the systems back up towards the end. I mean, to be honest, depending on how many systems you're bringing down, it might take 15, 20 minutes to log on all these different systems with 10 different people doing this, writing shutdown commands, stop SAP commands. That might take 15, 20 minutes. And on the way back up, it might take another 15, 20 minutes to do the same and go back and start them all up. All right, so if you combine that, that's a half hour of shutting down and starting up systems. If you've got a 2-hour maintenance window, that's 25% of your time just on starting and stopping systems, not including the communication to everyone saying, hey, the systems are now up and down, so on and so forth. So one of the nice areas with Xandria as well is our ability to automate the maintenance. So, or I should say the maintenance window. So it's really a 3-step process. First step, as you can see in the picture here, this is, again, the point of view of a managed service provider, where we're going to say we're going to take down all production systems for all of our customers. And step 2, just set the behavior and the time. So essentially 1 minute into it, we want to stop the SAP system. 10 minutes before the maintenance window's up, start all the SAP systems up. And then just sit back and let Xandria do its magic. It can notify the teams. You can have dashboards set up so different teams can actually log into the dashboard and make sure that all the systems are down before they go start their project work, and then that they're all coming back up okay. So there's just a lot of nice things you can do. Now you combine that with the cloud solutions as well, and it all becomes a very nice, easy to use management solution. So as we know and see, scaling SAP in the cloud isn't a point and click solution. Is not as easy as non-SAP applications, but with good planning and good architecting a good solution, thinking through this before moving in, and then using the right tools like Xandria that can help manage and see the health of the system and interact with the public clouds, you can actually automate the whole process. Now, one quick note here before we get into questions. What we've talked about today is just one part of the Syslink Xandria. There are many other module components that can be put in. We work with technical performance monitoring, obviously, because that's kind of the base level of everything from a technical aspect. We get into business process monitoring, which is a very nice way to map your business processes and actually tie them to a technical component. So it goes a little bit further than standard business process monitoring. We do audit and security and compliance and predictive resource consumption. Again, this is all software. So no consulting needs or any of that. Very easy to set up very quick. And with that, I think, Reed, I'll turn it back over to you for some questions.
Right. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I see that we got some questions, but feel free to write down your question and we'll try to address everything that we can. Okay, so first question. As hard shutdown could be detrimental to the system, what is Xandria's shutdown process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Or really good question. So again, one of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to just rip out SAP from underneath something that is running that can really be very detrimental to the system. So what Xandria is actually going to do is it's going to look at all those work processes, whether the dialogue, batch, whatever, see if anything's running, and make note. They can actually warn the team member if there's something running, saying, hey, there's something long running. But on top of that, what it also can do is one thing that we often forget about is oftentimes if you've got multiple systems, a specific order needs to be put in place. So maybe you need to take your PI system down before you bring your ECC system down, before your BW system, whatever that order is, and you can actually have Xandria specify the order so it knows which system needs to come down first.
Okay. Another question. Is this solution working only with the AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud?
Yeah, that's another good question. So from a public cloud perspective, yes. Now it's also important to note that Xandria was initially built as an on-premise solution. So obviously it still works on-premise. And then also another key thing is thinking back to one of those initial slides we had where there was platform as a service. There's a lot of managed service providers that are building out their own platform as a service on top of a public cloud or on top of a private cloud. They might be using Xandria as well.
Okay. So we're not in the cloud yet. Can we use any of these functionalities?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, not everything. There's a lot of things that Xandria can do. So, if you're thinking about going to the cloud, I guess one thing to think about is managing that whole process and monitoring that process. There's actually a lot that goes into it as to how to architect what it should be in the cloud, and Xandria can help benchmark that process beforehand so you understand how your system is currently acting or behaving. So afterwards, you know how to do that. It can also help identify areas of how you're going to be able to architect the solution later. So, should you be focused more on scaling up instead of scaling out, right? That you have to be able to understand how your system currently acts to be able to make those architectural based decisions in the future. On top of that, everything else that Xandria does, business process monitoring, audit, security and compliance, predictive planning, all of that is built for on-premise solutions as well.
Okay, awesome. So you get basically a consistent service throughout.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay. My cloud provider already provides Azure scaling tools. Why can I use those?
Yeah, sure. So that's another good question. So I think what they're asking. So the cloud provider. I think the question's probably around AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, the three that we've been focusing on today. They do have awesome automation scaling capabilities that was without a doubt something they can do great. Where they lose visibility is once that gets to SAP, and again, so every scaling situation where you need, or every performance issue is not just going to be something that can be viewed from an operating system perspective. There are certain things within SAP itself that may impact performance that you won't see from the operating system. So essentially, by marrying the two, using Xandria to be the eyes and ears of SAP, and then communicating back with the cloud platforms and their automation needs, that whole kind of the marriage of the two is what makes this magic happen and makes the full automation from start to finish, including SAP's up and down, really makes the whole picture work very, very fluid and very well.
Okay, great. Another question here. How does Xandria help us migrate SAP system to cloud?
Sure. So there's there's migrating to the cloud is essentially a whole migration process, which is or project, which is a big project. There's a lot of things that are going to be involved in there. There's also a lot of things in connections. There's a lot of things that your current system before it even moves in the cloud is set up. Just from using over years, there's probably connections that have gone to different places. There's different interfaces that it needs to talk to. There are certain things that your organization needs around policies, password length, and all of those things are all things that get forgotten about when you migrate. Xandria is actually able to capture all that information beforehand. Then during the migration process itself, it's going to do something else. It's actually going to be watching the log files, making sure that there's no critical errors popping up, things of that nature. And then once the system is up and running in the cloud, it's going to reference back to make sure that everything that was set up prior, all of the password policies, other policies that have to be in place for your business to run, from an audit standpoint, all of the interface connections they make sure that they are all still there. So there's a lot of things that need to get checked off very quick in that process. And towards the end of that project, when you kind of running up to your maintenance window here, is to getting that thing up and running before you hand it off to the business. Xandria can go through and automate a bunch of the checks to make sure that all of those things are in place. So not only is it a great tool from a day-to-day perspective, but from a migration project, there's a lot of great things that Xandria can help out with.
Awesome. If you have any more questions, please put them in the question tab. If there are no other further questions, we will conclude our webinar for today. Feel free to send us a question, and we will answer any of them or set up private demos. And we will send you, as I said, the recording of this webinar so you can rewatch it or share it with your colleagues. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, thank you, Reed, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.